damn late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
You came, you saw, you died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, bitch, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, you guys, introducing Pete Quinones, a.k.a. Pete Raymond, a.k.a. Mance Rayder. But now, yeah, Pete R. Quinones, now managing editor of the Libertarian Institute. Man, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. What's going on, Scott?
Interviewing you about stuff. First of all, I made you the managing editor. It was that easy. I just said, you are the managing editor, and it became true. And so now you're the managing editor of the Libertarian Institute. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. You know, you got me at the right time. I mean, I was hungover and, vulnerable, and sure, I was open to anything.
Great. And listen, you're done changing your name now, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to change my name anymore. But
that's the end of the name changes for now. Is that right?
Yeah, but I think I'm still on the podcast. I'm still going to just be Pete Raymond, and if anybody wants to call me Quinones, that's fine.
Nah, you should change that. Am I saying it right at all? Say it again.
Quinones.
Oh, you got to really get the quiche. Quinones. Yeah. It's a K. It's like an Arabic Q.
Yeah, but if you ask my brother, he'll pronounce it the way you did.
Huh. Well, what the hell does he know about it? Listen, no, change your name on your podcast too, man. Otherwise, everybody's just going to be confused all the time.
All right, I'll
just tell them what your name is.
I'll do it.
And just tell them, forget the Q. It's just a K sound, and they'll get it. It'll be fine. Quinones. It's fine. All right. Mance Rayder. I hate that show. My wife made me watch. I refused to watch any of them, but she made me watch the last few episodes of it, and they were really stupid. And I know everybody thought that, but I presume that the entire series was just as stupid as those last shows, just so that you know.
That's fine. It's like, I don't expect everybody to like the show.
I hate TV shows. I hate TV shows that everybody's all watching together separately in their little boxes. I just don't want to be a part of that. That's for everyone except me. Thank you. Listen,
I don't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I'm just not interested in the things that might be interesting. Tell me about some of these articles that you've written here. You got quite a bit of stuff that you've written just in the last couple of weeks here. A couple of blog entries, but mostly articles. You want to talk about guns first here?
Guns? Sure. I mean, I could talk about guns all day.
People are killing each other with them, and so that's a problem. And then so other people are saying that what should happen then is the government should help us out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what happens all the time, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember 1994 when they did the assault weapons ban, and that meant that nobody was going to kill anyone with a quote unquote assault weapon anymore. And then Columbine happened and a whole bunch of other things happened. And then in 2004, Bush let the bill run out and everything. And he was literally Hitler. So, I mean, people say, oh, well, what would happen if you were in Walmart when that happened? Well, I'd be shooting back. I mean, that's as simple. I mean, who stopped them? People showed up with guns to stop them. I mean, that's the way. If somebody knows that there's a chance that they're going to go in there, it's like the Pulse nightclub shooter. The guy went to some Disney nightclub first, saw that there was armed security, and he was like, okay, I got to look for a soft target. And then he went and he found a nightclub, and there was no armed guards or anything. So, That's just the way these people work. So if they think they're going to run into guns, they tend to back down or, commit suicide or something like that once they start shooting.
Yeah. So there's this old Bill Hicks joke about how in England, guns are outlawed. And you know how many shootings by guns they have in a year? Like 12. And he says, hey, I know the populations are different, but still, there's no connection between having a gun and shooting someone with it and not having a gun and not shooting someone with it. So he's kind of got a point, but at the same time, it's sort of, what it means is you'd have to have a real nationwide program of confiscation and the obliteration of the open market in guns and a full crackdown on gun possession to try to achieve some kind of gun-free America that would look anything like England. And then that probably would bring down the rates of inter-private citizen shootings with guns. But boy, would the rates of shootings by cops go up. Can you imagine what that would look like if they even tried something like that?
Well, the whole thing about Britain is Britain never really had a culture of guns. It was never something where, the populace itself was proud and they had their own version of the NRA, which is a terrible organization. Let me say GOA, Gun Owners of America. They didn't have that kind of thing. So when it came time to turn over the guns, sure, here, have this. I mean, I don't even know why I had it. It was my granddad's, whatever. I don't care. I mean, but here, that's not going to. It would be impossible. I really wish they would do it because something else I've been trying to inject into my articles lately is the idea that this whole 350 million people have to be one people thing is we have to throw that away. I mean, the only way that this thing is going to survive in any way whatsoever is to break it up into smaller pieces. And if they really started to do like a national kind of gun confiscation kind of thing, or the quote unquote buyback, which is mandatory, I really think you'll start seeing situations where you're going to see states be like, yep, nope, that's the final straw. Because I mean, right now, cops are killing people in the streets and nobody's shooting back, because the conservatives are, love the cops for some reason. I don't know why, but I think the conservatives, if they started saying, well, you're going to have to give up your guns, then maybe they'd finally be like, we really got to split this thing up. And, we're not going to put up with this. I mean, we put up with people getting, crying drunk men crawling down a hotel hallway, getting assassinated and, blown away by cowardly cops, on camera. But now this will be too far, but I mean, that's the way I look at it. Is I almost welcome it because, it was like the whole thing about Trump and Hillary. And I wrote about this in an article that I released today. Is if Hillary would have got elected, I think we'd have seen secession movements. We'd have seen a Ron Paul kind of revolution kicking off again. We would have seen a lot more people come over to our way of thinking. But Trump spoke a good game and seemed to be about liberty, even though he worships the police and he worships the military. So, I mean, people thought that, hey, maybe this can be Ron Paul 2.0. But no, we got John McCain, Ronald Reagan 2.0, or I don't even know what we got.
Yeah. Well, considering he never used the word liberty ever in his life, and particularly not in the campaign of 2015-16, pretty hard for anybody to really complain they got fooled into believing that. Pro-business is not pro-capitalism itself necessarily, or even understanding of it at all. I mean, if anything, he understands all the worst parts of it, and that's what he likes the best. What we need is an inflationary bubble so that the economy seems good until I'm out of office. What we need is big contracts to sell weapons to the Saudis to use against the Yemenis. That's cold, hard, green dollars right there, don't you see? That's his economic doctrine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why people looked at him and thought that he was going to be able to improve anything. I mean,
well, because he wasn't Hillary Clinton. That makes enough sense.
That makes sense too. But they also got it in their head that more important than fighting against the state is we need to own the libs, and he's going to own the libs. Well, that really hasn't helped, push forward, Ron Paul's vision of what we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely not. And, the truth is, too, is we could go back to the Articles of Confederation and it would still be the USA. It's just all of this central planning that is got everybody at each other's throats and this kind of thing, when there really shouldn't be this much to fight about.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to Judge Napolitano recently, and I asked him that question. I said, what do you think would happen? Would we have more freedom or, more liberty or less liberty if we just went back to the Articles of Confederation? And he said, well, I think a lot of areas would have a lot more freedom. He said, but I think a lot of, there'd be many areas that would, become more totalitarian. He said, especially like, the Chicagos and the New Yorks, and, they would really crack down, but then again, they would potentially have the ability to vote with their feet and go somewhere else if they, wanted to. So,
I used to think too that, there's no chance in this day and age that Jim Crow could come back without the federal government to stop it, kind of thing. But I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I don't want the federal government to win really ever, but it's hard to really argue that you have less liberty by and large with federal government intervention on that issue.
Yeah. Well,
although it sure has opened the door to a lot of other things. I admit that, but
yeah, there's when you have a government, if they fix one thing, they've probably broken another while they were doing it.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you like supporting anti-war radio hosts? That makes sense. Here's how you can do that. Go to scotthorton.org/donate, and there's all kinds of options to do so and all kinds of different kickbacks at different levels. Of course, take PayPal, Patreon, and all different kinds of digital currencies and all of those sorts of things. And anybody who signs up by way of Patreon or PayPal to donate $5 a month to the show will automatically get keys to the Reddit room, my own private Reddit group that I have. Quite a few members now and lots of fun in there every day. So check out all about that at scotthorton.org/donate. And thanks. All right. Well, so talk a little bit about this Bernie Sanders article that you wrote about the healthcare crisis, because, I hear people all the time and making real sense say, hey, you know what? The opposite of socialized healthcare is not libertarianism. Really, the opposite of it is what we have now, which is this horrible cronyism where maybe it's socialism for the drug companies and the hospital companies and the insurance companies, but it's fascism for the rest of us. It's pure gangsterism and all of this cartelism over the supply of doctors and all of the different, every bit of what I'm talking about here. So a lot of people are talking about, hey, sort of the same thing with the Jim Crow thing. It's like, well, we could wait around for the people of Alabama to gain enlightenment, or we're just going to have to force this issue. And it's sort of the same thing here. They're not going to repeal all the regulations that made it this way. But meanwhile, people are dying of being broke. And because they can't afford the artificially high prices that government has helped to create. And so middle of the road leads to socialism, Pete, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we do just need to get the national government to pick up the tab. What do you say?
No, free market would work. The Affordable Care Act was, with the exception of the mandate, which I would relate more to socialism. The Affordable Care Act was written by the insurance company lobbyists. It was fascism. They were just consolidating. It was almost like the government was just signing off on a couple different exchanges around the country and giving them monopoly rule over the industry. And now Bernie Sanders, not understanding that, or maybe understanding that. I don't know his motivations. I assume they're evil. He's a politician, career. He wants to put all of this under the government. And the way I see it is the only way that would be carried out in the United States is the insurance company, the doctors would still be employed, but now office visits, certain procedures, operations, they would all, there would be an actuary table, and this is how much you're getting paid for this, and and you're all and it's all coming from the government, which is coming from the taxpayers, or inflating the money supply, or however they plan on doing it. There's going to be a lot of incentive for doctors to perform extra procedures so that they can get paid more. So fraud will immediately jump into it. And then depending on how much doctors and nurses will make now, you may not have the best people going into the field. You may have people going into the field who are just like, oh, I never thought I could be a doctor, but I guess I can be a doctor now. And, the $50,000 a year sounds great to me because I was making 20, changing oil or something like that when I was a teenager or something, when I was 19, something like that. I mean, it's just the implications for it, for what Bernie's talking about doing, is horrifying, and it will lead to VA style care. And really the only answer is the free market. I mean, it's to release. I mean, if there's only in Georgia, if there's only 2 or 3 insurance companies that you can choose from, and they're only allowed to operate in certain states, you don't have a free market in healthcare. And that's what a lot of people believe. A lot of people believe there's a free market in healthcare because they're uneducated. They don't understand simple economics. But really, to let them sell over state lines and to let insurance companies open up and compete and do all that. I mean, in 5 years, if you were to just do that, in 5 years, healthcare would be way cheaper than it is now, and it probably have a higher quality. And I would assume that even poor people would be able to afford health care, and they'd probably be getting the same kind of quality care that a lawyer could afford right now. And that's just what the market does.
Well, and it just goes without saying to a Democrat that no, all those regulations are there to protect the people of Texas from some scumbag insurance company out of Delaware that would not, that is subject to much more lax regulations and don't have to deliver a quality product to the people here. So got to have that sort of oversight. So how do you answer for that?
Well, I mean, but that insurance company has been given money to that Democrat. They've also been given money to that Republican. I've interviewed a lobbyist on my podcast, and I asked him. I said, "So, who do you give money to when they call?" He goes, "We give money to everybody." He goes, "When they call and they say, hey, we need a donation now. We need a contribution now. I asked him. I said, do you guys lean left or do you lean right?" He goes, "We lean everyone." He goes, "We keep everyone paid because that's the only way that we can stay in business." It's the same thing with the insurance companies. I mean, the insurance companies are in bed with the government. I mean, Bernie is I would say he's just acting and playing a role in saying, oh, that insurance company there is horrible and everything, because I guarantee you that insurance company has cut him a check at some point, if not every year.
Yeah. You know what? There was only one guy that they ever said this about, that the lobbyists don't even darken his door because they know this won't do him any good. And that's Dr. Ron Paul. And that was the Washington Post. They said, seriously, the lobbyists don't even bother him because he says to everybody the same thing. Sorry, that's not in the Constitution. And so that's it. Conversation over. And I've never heard that said about anybody else up there, I'll tell you that.
It's funny. In all these articles I've started writing and everything, I think I probably in each one of them I refer to Dr. Paul at least once.
Yeah, man. Well, it's because he's good on everything. By the way, I got a book of all of my interviews with Ron Paul coming out real soon. Everybody's going to like it. It's called The Great Ron Paul, which is a pretty obvious title for it. Hey, Listen, so you do have this podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall, and you've had some really interesting stuff on there. So now tell me everything about what Ryan McMacken said, and also this guy, was it Justin Long, who was Special Operations Forces in Somalia? Maybe do that one first.
Okay, yeah, Justin was, he's, I forget what phrase he used, but he's basically psyops. What they would do is, he said they were stationed in Somalia, but they would go back and forth between Somalia and Djibouti. But their goal in Somalia was to try to convince members of al-Shabaab or people who are loyal to al-Shabaab to turn their back on them, or if they were a member, to quit. And they would do that with all the same kind of psyops that you heard of in Afghanistan, where they try to get the Taliban, members of the Taliban to leave, or people loyal to the Taliban. And yeah, I mean, he did a really good explanation of what they did. But I thought the more important part was just talking about all the different countries that go into Somalia, do business with Somalia, or try to take advantage of Somalia, and just, what they do. He talked about how he thought that their greatest ally and the people that actually would seem to have the Somali government, the president of Somalia, who used to live in Buffalo and I think ran the DMV there or something like that. He said Turkey is probably their best ally there. So he talked a little bit about their relationship with Turkey, talked a little bit about the surrounding nations and what they have to deal with, Ethiopia, and talked a lot about how the United States is just there sowing discord and chaos. And I mean, he's not proud of his service, and talks about that pretty clearly in that episode. It's a good episode to listen to. It's about 45 minutes too. It's not too long.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so Mises.org, home of the anarcho-capitalists, their editor over there, I'm not exactly sure his title, Ryan McMacken. What's he got to say about immigration and the current crisis here?
McMacken is the head.
Of course, I've said it wrong all this time. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. I think Ryan forgives you. But he's the editor of Mises Wire, but he writes a lot of articles. I mean, some days I see him release 3 of his own articles. Specifically about immigration, he just really wanted to talk about how, with the expanding the border out, with the border being expanded out 100 miles, he talked a lot about how they can pick up anybody they want. The Constitution just doesn't exist there. I think shortly after we did the interview, Trump announced that it's not even 100 miles anymore. It's anywhere. They can basically set up checkpoints anywhere in the United States looking for illegals. And he said that from 2011 till February of this year, 2011 till February of this year, 18% of the people who were arrested for being illegal were actually citizens of the United States. We talked a lot about how this is just expanding the police state, where down on the border, and recently I had a former Border Patrol agent. He left because he couldn't, it just wore on his conscience, Joshua Childress on. And he talks about how he was stationed, I think, in Yuma Station, Arizona. And he's talking about how he's pretty sure they're just going to set up checkpoints between states. So like, you're on the interstate, you're crossing over into another state, you're going to be stopped. So if you're if you're headed somewhere out of Colorado and you just bought, that fun stuff that's legal in Colorado, and you're transferring it to another state, potentially you could be stopped, your car can be searched. And now, because it's against the law federally, now the feds can arrest you because you had a half an ounce of marijuana that you're bringing home from Denver. We just talked about all the implications of that. We went through all the arguments about, oh, they're going to change the culture. Oh, they're going to come here and vote. Oh, they're going to come here and get on welfare. And I think he just did a really good job of smacking most of those down. People who are on the other side of that argument, who are just hardcore border hawks, nothing's going to change their mind. So, he just put it out there for the people who are willing to listen. And I think he did a great job.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think the polls are pretty consistent when they do ask about this, that immigrants support America's expansive foreign policy the least. So that makes them the best Americans of all, sounds like.
Well, if they came from Central America, they've seen it firsthand, haven't they?
Yeah. Or Mexico, too. Tens of thousands killed, maybe more, just since the George W. Bush drug wars there.
Yeah, it's just...
since he started them, I'm not trying to let Obama off the hook either,
It's very interesting, too. I've heard from people who know what's going on with the cartels down there, and the cartels do not really pay attention to weed anymore. So, I knew an American who was selling weed down there, and there was no problems with it and everything. The cartels wouldn't mess with them. Now they're into coke. So it just really goes to show you.
Yeah, and Reason really has done great coverage of that, how the legalization of pot, especially cultivation in the U.S., has just completely bankrupted the black market in pot from Mexico, and they've had to switch to other stuff.
Yeah, they've had to switch to coke. Well,
and meanwhile, you have, I mentioned the Obama years there. You had an outright CIA alliance with the Sinaloa cartel, and that was what that gun walking supposedly scandal was about, where you had, these cartel gangsters killing American cops with guns that American cops sold them in order to fight against the Zetas, who I guess maybe were they the CIA's former patrons that got out of control or whatever? I don't know.
That's the way it always works, isn't it?
Well, I think the Zetas, they were former military and they took over a part of the gang. I think they did have a relationship with the Americans that then had fallen apart, but I'm the furthest thing from expert on that. But I know the CIA was back in the Sinaloa cartel that whole time. So you talk about the drug wars over there. It's not a matter of, eliminating supply. It's a matter of picking sides. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, they really, they had a good running with weed for as long as they did, but now as much legalization as there is, now they concentrate on coke. Well, how about legalizing that?
Yeah,
and then if they start running heroin, well, legalize that. Just legalize everything. I mean, how long has Dr. Paul been talking about this? Just legalize it all. Let adults be adults. People who aren't going to do heroin today aren't going to do heroin tomorrow. You can make the argument about what about the kids, but that's just your typical argument. And any right winger pro-gun person who makes a what about the kids argument about drugs, they don't dare let an anti-gunner make that argument about guns. So why don't you just be a little consistent?
Yeah.
If kids are mature enough and you've trained them enough that they can handle guns properly, well, I mean, you can train them to not do heroin and not do coke. Tell them that would be bad for them. I mean,
seriously, you know what? You can you can smog out your car as bad as could be, but you're not going to suffocate and die. But guess what? If you smoke a bunch of opium, you might, because that lowers your breathing rate, sometimes all the way to nothing. And so that's just real. You don't have to propagandize anybody. You just have to teach them. Yeah, the thing about heroin and other opiates is sometimes they make your heart stop. Yeah, and then, that's pretty permanent.
Yeah, and just teach them the history of opium dens and
so that's
things
not
like
the same as taking a bong rip. That's something altogether different,
Yeah, coke too. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's done coke has gotten to that point where you're like, all right, I either need a Xanax or go to the hospital. But once again, anybody who's not doing coke today is not the average person's not going to do coke tomorrow, especially if they're adamantly against it today.
That was a great Ron Paul episode too at the Republican debate where he says, "Oh, how many people here tonight are going to start doing heroin tomorrow if they legalize it?" I mean, what are we talking about here? Yeah, control. And by the way, anybody who really wants to become a junkie will be able to find some. No question about that.
Oh yeah.
Well, it might come with a dirty AIDS needle this time,
I mean, I live in Georgia. Marijuana is not legal here. It's not hard to, everyone knows somebody, it's, and finally Atlanta in the last 5 years has, taken it from, oh, if we find you with less than an ounce, you're going to get arrested, to, oh, if we find you with less than an ounce, you get a $50 ticket. I'd rather shell out $50, I don't want to shell out $50 at all, but I'd rather do it than going to jail,
Yeah. Yeah, the drug wars. You'd have thought that, well, no, you wouldn't have thought that they'd give up by now. You'd have thought that maybe the American people would have forced them to give up by now. But I guess not. It's too easy to point to the immediate consequences of drug abuse and ignore all the effects of trying to outlaw it. It just goes without saying that if government would just try to make it go away harder, then it would. Why won't they try hard enough? That's all.
There's an example in recent history of what prohibition does, but nobody wants to apply that to weed, coke, and heroin, because in the last 70 or 80 years, it's, everybody, people drink. It's what you do. It's social. Everybody drinks. President, well, this president doesn't drink, but the former president drinks. So everybody on TV, there's ads for it. So it's not that bad. Tell these people to go study when it was illegal, just how safe it was to own a bar, to own a restaurant in Chicago or New York, when you were trying to get illegal booze in there and there was all this crime going on, or if you decided to get into business yourself. I mean, that's why there's violence. I mean, we have a historical precedent for it.
Yeah.
But I guess got to keep those prisons full.
Yeah. Well, and it's true that alcohol causes all kinds of problems. In fact, most American gun murders are caused by drunk people on the weekends. Probably mostly blacked out drunk and realized the next day that I killed who again? What? Oh, no. This happens constantly, but still. So what are you going to do? Allow the drunken, armed to the teeth government stop them from doing it? All these people with their own problems and then some, and a badge of impunity to go with it to solve these problems for us. As you said, we have a controlled double-blind experiment in how this works. And as everyone recognizes, everyone on the political spectrum who's ever heard of American history knows that Prohibition created Al Capone. That the modern mafia was born in the controlling of the black market that was created by the law. The alcohol didn't go away, and alcoholism was not reduced. In fact, it backfired, right? Because people started drinking harder liquor so they could, spend less and, economize essentially on the potency of the drug, which we see in black markets of all different kinds of drugs too. So you're right. And for anyone, I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but I learned about that in junior high. I may have already known about it from TV before junior high even, but we studied Prohibition in junior high, and they explained to us why it didn't work. And after all, how can you get around Scarface Capone? He's Al Capone. He's like as famous as Benjamin Franklin or any other American that ever existed. It's part of our heritage of who we are. Joe Kennedy and their entire dynasty comes from running black markets in alcohol during that era. Come on, you can't deny it. It's part of what everyone knows about American history. It's like whether Indians ever used to live here or not. Yeah.
And I mean, I've done an episode of my podcast with Jason Purz, who's done all this research into a lot of those families you're talking about. In the 19th century, they were moving opium through China. Yeah. So they were bringing opium from China through the United States, and they'd peel it off in a couple places here, and then they'd send it over to England.
Yeah. So that was even the cliche, was bootleggers and Baptists were in this alliance to keep it that way too. The last thing a real cartel owner wants is for the drug to be legalized. That would ruin everything. So yeah, it makes sense why a bunch of black market opium dealers would then look at the illegality of alcohol as the economic opportunity that it was, plain as day. even though other people might not see it. They're Baptist collaborators, completely blind to the fact. They just thought they're doing the Lord's work, saving women from getting beaten at night and stuff like that. Make sure men go to work on time in the morning.
Yeah, well, that was always the argument against weed was, we can't make this legal because it relaxes people too much. It makes people think too much, and alcohol just pretty much numbs people and, makes some people feel good and makes some people violent.
I really need to start drinking. I keep putting it off, but I know the time's coming. I should let you go, man. Thanks for coming back on the show, dude. Great to talk to you. And wait, is this the first time I interviewed you?
No, I was on once before. We were talking about the Ross Ulbricht case.
Oh, yeah.
You need to.
By the way, go ahead and talk about that for a second then, please. Tell me what I need to what?
Well, a lot of information has come out since then. And I think you really should have Lynn Ulbricht on your show to talk about it. From the public records, they were able to do a 6-part documentary that's on YouTube that's called Railroaded.
Oh, man, really?
And it shows, and I think each episode.
Hey, post that on the blog at the Institute, would you?
Yeah, man, no problem. But it is when you see just exactly how targeted he was and how they can't even prove that at the time they were monitoring stuff that he still had anything to do with the website. I mean, and then you see all the graft, the people, the agents getting arrested who had a part in the investigation, who were undercover on the site as admins and could change chats and anything. It's just mind-boggling. But yeah, I'll throw that in the blog.
And this is a guy who's doing life for running a dark web site where people could buy and sell drugs.
Yeah.
And he was sentenced on the idea that he had arranged the murder of some guy, which was not one of the charges and was not something he was convicted of, and was later revealed, maybe it was known all along, but it was definitely later reinforced that was a total hoax. And yet the judge, I believe, if I got the story right, explicitly took this hitman account, charge, not really charge, into account in the sentencing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was something he was originally charged with. As soon as they got bail denied, they dropped those charges, and they went through, and he was found kingpin. He got the kingpin put on him and distributing narcotics, even though the drugs never touched his hands once at all. And another thing about it is in the sentencing, and when Judge Harris is making comments, she mentions not liking the kind of libertarian thought that Ross, subscribed to.
Great. Well, and like a good Democrat, she knows we're to the right of Dick Cheney, so.
Yeah, I mean, she's hey, she was appointed by Chuck Schumer. Do you need to know anything else? Chuck Schumer was the one who pushed, even though nothing was ever done in New York City, Chuck Schumer was the one who pushed so that the Southern District of New York could get the case.
Yeah, man. Well, all right, and then say the name of it again, this documentary?
It's called Railroaded.
Railroaded. I could have remembered that from a minute ago.
Railroaded, the targeting and caging of Ross Ulbricht.
Great.
And it's about 20 minutes an episode, so you're looking at about that was terrible with math. 2 hours, and it is the information you get there. By the end of the second episode, you're already furious.
Yeah.
You just realize exactly what they did to him, and they wouldn't let any of this come out. All of this public, all the stuff that's in the public that allowed them to make this documentary until after, basically they took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied it. So now the only way he can ever be released is through clemency.
Man, that's really something. You know what, though? That's I don't know. what it takes to get the right pop star to support you or something. But that's the latest fad is, belated fairness for, previous convicts in certain celebrity cases. And we just saw one of these the other day where this poor girl who was a victim, who had every right to kill the guy that she killed in self-defense, who was essentially, had kidnapped her and was holding her, was served 15 years of a life sentence, but some pop stars took her side and led a kind of public campaign to get the governor of, I think, Kentucky it was, to commute her sentence there. So, I don't know if Ross Ulbricht is, all the right demographics, but, this should be for everybody of all different political sects and whatever. There are a lot of innocent people in prison, a lot of extremely overcharged people in prison who never really did anything to anybody. They were on three-way on a phone call when somebody else sold drugs to somebody else, or just the most insane, unfair things that you would expect from a lawless, totalitarian police state. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, unlimited cases like that. So anytime that anybody's getting out like that, that should be supported, and we should try to emulate that when it comes to, Ross Ulbricht or anybody else we know of like that. I don't know of any more heroic work than the Innocence Project and things along those lines. So, you never know. And by the way, he never really did anything to anybody. So if he really was that railroaded, then it ought to be a pretty simple case.
It really is. Once you watch the documentary or listen to it, it's simple. It's open and shut, and he should be. But not only him. I mean, sometimes I'll advocate for Ross online on social media. So you're like, oh well, what, you're advocating for the white guy? No, I want to burn pretty much all the prisons to the ground. I want them all to be gone. I mean, they're the overwhelming majority of people in prison are there for nonviolent offenses. So, and the people who are in there for violent offenses, it's like, really, how long should they be in there? I mean, they have this arbitrary number now, and is it rehabilitating them or is it just making them worse? And it just. It's not rehabilitation. It's just punishment. And if you've seen anything about the prison systems in Alabama or Mississippi recently, they just let a lot of these prisons run down to the point where they'd be condemned if they weren't government buildings.
Yeah. Well, and if anybody's ever been in prison, they'll tell you that most people in there, as an old friend of mine said, or just excess humanity being warehoused out of the way. Essentially, people who aren't there for any good reason at all, really, other than the government needs a body for that cell more than any other thing.
That's for sure. I read something about how it costs upwards of $50,000 to house a prisoner in California. On a yearly basis, and I'm like, come on. There's no way they're spending $50,000. Where's the rest of that going?
Yeah, and by the way, it's captive labor to work for 5 cents a day or 5 cents an hour, whatever it is, for other corporations to come in and exploit them and use them, which is just slavery. The fact that that's allowed at all. When I was a kid, the cliche was making license plates or something, which is. Well, like the only product that the government produces is license plates. So they have them do that. But now they're answering your phone calls at customer service, and they're sewing, and they're doing God knows what, like it's some third world country, like China, a fascist dictatorship. I mean, sort of commie, but you know what I mean.
I mean, just walk into a courtroom, and I had Monica Perez on my show today on the episode I released. And she said, just nobody plead. Everyone demand a jury trial. Destroy the system overnight. So what is it? 98% are plea bargains now.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, and if you don't plead, they'll add on charges. They have a name for it. What's the name for it? I get it right. The trial fee or whatever it is. The trial. Whatever. If you try to demand a jury, then they will just absolutely stick it to you no matter what. Even if you get acquitted on the thing we originally charged you with, we're charging you with 10 more things now. And that'll teach you to act like the Fifth and Sixth Amendment mean a thing.
Yeah,
so
but I mean,
that's
if
the
everybody,
American way right now, for sure. And it's all because of the drug wars. All of this is because of the drug wars. Man, there's no way to even begin to quantify how much American liberty has been destroyed in the name of prohibition of pot and coke and stupid heroin, whatever, pills.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still think, man, if everybody demanded a jury trial, just like if everybody woke up in the morning and decided they weren't going to pay taxes anymore, what the hell are they going to do? I mean, in the second case, they can't do anything. In the case of the jury trial, I mean, they won't know what to do.
Well, word to the jurors too. You guys can refuse to convict. You can just say, "I'm not convinced. I'm not sure that he really did it," and just nullify. You don't have to go along. There's no crime in that. I'm not saying accept a bribe to change your vote or anything like that, but just say, no, I don't see the crime in this. I'm not going along with this. I'm not convinced by the evidence as presented, and nullify. And that's another thing that, of course, the government, the district attorney's offices always do everything they can to make sure that the jury is stocked with government employees and spouses of government employees. So, good luck getting a jury of your peers up there unless you are one of them. But still, they're sometimes regular humans squeak through and can be involved on juries. And, I know someone who, told me a story about really regretting that she had to convict somebody of cocaine possession. And what it was the cops had come in the house, and the law said that if you're in the same room with the stuff, essentially, or in the same house with the stuff, that you're in possession of it too. So even though it was really 2 people that had it, it was 5 people that were charged with it. And that, the law said, the judge said to us that the law says that counts. And so if we find that the evidence is clear that they really were in the room, that's really the only question then. And so went ahead and convicted. And couldn't stretch your brain around the idea that you just didn't have to. You could have just said no. You could have just said, I don't know, I'm just not convinced those people really were in the room. You weren't there. Maybe there is reasonable doubt there. Maybe there's reasonable doubt as to whether the law really means that innocent people are guilty too, because that just doesn't seem right. What about that? But essentially, hey, the judge said, but did the judge say, or else you're going to go to prison if you don't convict this person? No. Judge said, or he's going to be very disappointed in you. So, and people need to be brave enough to take a stand on things like that, man, and recognize that they are individual human actors. That's the purpose of a jury in the first place. Otherwise, the government would have just carted these people off a long time ago. And for all we know, I don't know how much the other people in the room had in their pocket. These people might have been facing decades behind bars, man. Decades for something that somebody else did that wasn't a crime anyway. And that just passes as normal. That's just the natural state of affairs in America on a Tuesday.
Jury nullification is a powerful thing. A friend of mine just recently got on a jury, and it was a long drug case, and he basically convinced the jury room to not convict. I think they ended up, there were a couple people that got charged, but he had decided that the people that were getting charged were probably guilty of the charges, but the other people weren't. He said it was very clear that they weren't, that they were just caught up in something. And one of them was literally an innocent bystander, and not so innocent, had drugs on him, but was not selling, had no intent to distribute or anything like that. And he was able to get, I think it was 3 or 4 people to walk. And he told me, he said the jury room, was ready to convict. And it said it was him and one other guy who just was like, if you're paying attention to this, you should realize that these guys are innocent of it. And they turned the jury room around and saved some guys' lives.
Heroic, man. Absolutely. And just goes to show the power of, if people are willing to do the right thing and take a stand on stuff like that. I don't know how many cases I've heard. Some really famous ones, like the Waco trial, and a lot of just plain old cases where the jurors later say, well, we compromised. Some of us didn't want to convict at all, but these two guys were like cops' brothers, and they insisted, so we went ahead and found him guilty of second degree, whatever it is. And it's just like, no, man, you should have said, you know what? If I got to sit here for 6 weeks, I'm not convicting this guy. Screw you. Why do people have to feel like they just have to bend for someone else when there's no real consequence that they face? That's their privilege as a juror to just refuse, Anyway, yeah. God dang it. Nobody ever asked me to be on a jury, but I'd be hard-pressed to go along with anything but a real crime. No offenses. Yeah. No offenses. If somebody was accused of an offense, they'd skate. Real crime against somebody else, I don't know. I probably wouldn't show up in the first place, but
Yeah. Well, violation of somebody's person or property, I consider that to be a real crime. The only problem I have with it is the punishment that this state wants to hand out. Is it the right punishment? I don't know. I have a tendency to want to say not guilty to everything.
Right. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Is you don't know what the sentencing is going to look like. You convict, you think they're going to get a slap on a wrist, and then you find out they get 20 years, and then it's too late to say, oops, well, I didn't know they were going to sentence them to 20 years. That kind of thing happens all the time, too.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Hey, the flag is still red, white, and blue, and that is more meaningful than any of the other things that we've discussed today, so don't ever forget that.
Considering the military and the police, the flag is a whole lot more red than it is the other two colors.
Yeah, you got that right. Okay, guys, that's Mance Rayder, a.k.a. Pete Raymond. His real name is Peter R. Wait, what?
Quinones.
Quinones. That's what I was going to say, but then I second-guessed myself. Quinones. Peter R. Quinones. And he is now managing editor of the Libertarian Institute, where you can find his great podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall, and plus a lot of great articles he's been writing for us, too. So, very good, and thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Always a pleasure.
See you, man. All right, y'all, thanks. Find me at libertarianinstitute.org, at scotthorton.org, antiwar.com, and reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. Oh, yeah, and read my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, at foolserrand.us.